Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today, really quick, this is going to be a more off-the-cuff video, but this is in defense of Kashtira, Ariseheart, and Dimension Shifter. Now, a lot of people want these cards banned, and frankly, I can't blame them. Ariseheart's just an extremely oppressive and powerful card, and in the case of Dimension Shifter, it can easily warp the game. However, I do have some defense on this, because if you really look at both of them, they do stem from a problem that Konami's been ignoring, which is card design. And it's kind of a similar issue that we have with something like Eradicator Epidemic Virus. A lot of people just want it banned because it's a ridiculous card, but if you really look at the problem with Eradicator, it's the fact that, one, it gives you knowledge, obviously, which is, I think, even more important than it ripping hands. But the point is, when it rips out of hands of spells, it is because spells have become so important into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame, it's almost impossible to think a deck without spells can exist, although some of them do. But the point I want to get across is that you really can't blame the Dimension Shifter or Ariseheart for their existence, because Konami once created them, but more importantly, they're designed with purpose in mind, and they show a weakness that the game has, which is obviously the reliance on our graveyards as a second pool, but more importantly, the usage of the graveyard is something that is clearly powerful. Like, that's just not something to exaggerate. If you were to look at how many decks rely on their graveyard, or even just use their graveyard to retrieve materials, it's pretty clear that Ariseheart and Dimension Shifter cut that line off. So most decks aren't designed around to, not use it. Although there are decks that can compete against it, and by the meta report we've seen so far, Kashtira is unbeatable. And Dimension Shifter does see play, but it only sees play in a few decks. The point I'm trying to get across is that banning them isn't necessarily the problem. I think it's more of the design that we need to go with going forward, as I do think Macrocosmos is an amazing card that I think doesn't get the justice it deserves, because obviously it's not playable in every deck, and most decks don't cite it. But the point is, this effect to banish cards from the graveyard is actually really unique, and I think it should stick around, but I do think there's some caveats that should be made. And I do think something like Dimension Shifter and Ariseheart probably will see their time on the ban list at some point. But the thing I want to get across is, if you're watching this, or if you just want to think that this is a ridiculous point, I do say, well, you're not wrong, but at the same time, there are some, obviously, arguments for, not banning these cards. As I do think Ariseheart by itself has many flaws that need it to be banned, and I do think at some point it could come back, but I really think it should be errated. That's just going to be for a future video that I want to talk about, but that's one of my personal feelings. For Dimension Shifter, I really like Dimension Shifter. I think it's fantastic, but if I had to be honest, I do think it needs to probably be hit in some capacity. But if they're going to ban it outright, I think it's best then to go to 2 or even 1, because at 1 it's just sacky, and at 2 it's like there's still a chance to see it in the game, because it's really oppressive. It's basically the same argument for Floodgates. If anyone's going to argue for Floodgates, I'm like, well, I think Floodgates should, in all reality, be conditional, and I mean extremely conditional. So even something like Gozen Match, I think, is really too powerful, because it doesn't make the deck have to be monotyping, but if you're playing against a deck that obviously isn't monotyping in terms of their attributes, they're screwed. So I think Floodgates probably should be reworked to have more conditions, like you need to control an X amount of monsters. I would really prefer if Floodgates and effects like that were maybe archetypal. Like, I do think something like Ariseheart, one of its biggest problems is that it's just a blanket banish all cards. When in reality, I think you should have to control, maybe the field spell face up or something, cards like that, where I think, although people are like, oh, well, that's going to make it lazy or difficult to use. I'm like, if you're using a field spell in a deck and the card has to require you to have the field spell face up, is that really that bad? I think that's fine if you're going to get a busted effect like Ariseheart does. But that's just my, opinions and thoughts. Dimension Shifter, I mean, it's not really much to talk about. It's just really annoying to get hit with it, even though I've tried playing decks with it, but it sucks to draw it. And ultimately, if they get it out of the game, it's okay. It's not going to kill anyone, but, I'd prefer maybe they work around it or something. But at the end of the day, guys, that's all I've got. So yeah, this is more off-the-cuff video. So, leave some comments down below what you think. Share it to everybody, and subscribe. And don't forget to like the video. I'm signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.